Hello? 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 Good morning.
Hi, Stephen.
Okay, now I can hear you.
Okay, Tani was on, and now he's coming back on right now. Is that Audrey Hepburn
No,
behind you?
it's some Asian model with very little on.
Oh, okay.
Hi, Stephen. Good morning.
Morning.
Okay, I'm gonna step off.
Okay, so this is my first reintroduction to Talmud in 65 years.
Oh, wow. A lot of pressure. Amazing. Just one before Michael, there's one person I learned with, like he's the most consistent. He's a new member at the synagogue, actually. His name is Dr. Michael Kafferson. I don't know if you met him before, but I doubt it. He lives in Palm Beach. He's not a snowbird. He's there all year. Part of this class at the end of the season, literally the end of the season this year, I guess, the end of the winter, and he's been the one that's like there consistently every single week. What we do is I sent him a PDF of the English translation of the Maseches Sukkah. Not an art scroll translation, not the Steinsaltz one. This is just like a literal translation to keep it pure. And he has the whole PDF. And before every Friday, before every week, he reads ahead a bit. Sometimes he reads a lot ahead, sometimes less, but he reads ahead just so he could have more context before we start. And then when we actually start learning, I start from the beginning again, not like he just asks me questions on what he read and I answer them. Rather, we go through it, and as we go along, the parts that he didn't understand, he'll point out and be like, "Hey, 1 second, I know we just read this, but I missed this point." Or he'll be like, "Now I understand, what the answer to my question was," because of just the way I said it, the way, obviously, not in a bragging way, since I have more experience, I was able to say it in a way that it clicked, or more than just the actual literal translation of the Gemara, and that's what made it more understandable for him. So that's kind of the format of what we're doing. So I did send Myra the PDF for you if you would be interested in getting it. She can send it to you. And so then you have the English that we're going to read from. And where we're holding Daf Yod Amud Beis. We're holding 10b. That's what we're holding.
Okay.
So that's in regards to that.
Looks like what you sent over is a marathon production. So and the worst part of it doesn't have any page numbers. So I'm trying to keep it in order.
It should have page numbers. It doesn't. It might finish off in the middle of it's a PDF, correct? Is that yes, you got,
yes.
right?
Yeah, but what I'm saying, it's still printing. It's
oh,
like 40 pages.
Oh wow, yeah, no, I didn't mean. I didn't mean to print the whole thing. I thought you were going to read it on your computer.
But Tani, there was no way of printing one page. You just print and then the thing just goes.
Right now, so I thought you were going to read it on the computer without printing.
No. I'm 80 years old and my eyes aren't that good, so.
Okay, I should have known. I should have just cut the PDF to specifically where we're holding. I can do that, by the way. Every week I can send out, just what we're gonna read that week. Would
I
that be
think that would
helpful?
be very helpful.
Okay, amazing. I'll do that. I'll cut it, just page, I'll
But
cut the
you should
PDF.
just send out in a PDF what you're gonna cover in the session.
Exactly. And I'll send it out a few days before, or maybe even the beginning of the week, just so whenever you're free time, you can look it over and then, you'll come to the class with a better preparedness. Okay, so let's get started. It could be he's having issues with the Zoom, so that's okay. I'll figure it out with him. So we're holding, if it's printing up from the beginning, then by now you probably have at least 10A. Do you have 10A?
No, Tani, I'm telling you, there are no pages here, okay? What there are, the sections of the Talmud, like I just opened the middle of what was printed out. I'm at 8A and 8B, and at the very end so far, and it's still printing, at 15 and 16B.
Yeah, that's perfect. So where it says 8, what you need is 10A. That's what you need, exactly, section 10A.
You want me to go to 10A?
Yeah, that's where we're holding. I'm sorry that that I didn't realize that.
Okay. I just saw a guy who did magic, dealing out cards, and I just automatically got to 10A. Okay.
There you go. That's how you know it's the right thing. When it happens magically. Amazing. So if you see on 10A, there should be a Mishnah there. How you know it's a Mishnah?
In what circumstances?
Right. But if you'll see, there's in middle of 10A, there's a Mishnah. It's like the letters are all capital letters. The whole paragraph is just capital letters.
Yeah.
So
If one spreads a she over it.
Exactly. So that's a Mishnah. That's how you know if it's a Mishnah. I mean, it says the word Mishnah also, but it's just easier to spot it out when you see it like that. Now, so this Mishnah is coming right after a different Mishnah about having a tree over a sukkah that you might be familiar with. That can be an issue. So it's kind of following along with that topic.
Tani, that I was at a dinner last Thursday night, not this Thursday night, at the Colony Hotel. And have you ever been at the Colony?
I got married at the Colony, Steve.
Okay.
Believe it or not.
There you go. So the outside dining place has a sechach. And I asked Moshe if this sechach is kosher or not. And he said, it all depends as to whether the sechach is supported by trees that are rooted in the ground. And this one was not. So I said, if it isn't supported by trees, do I make, even this was not a religious dinner, so do I make a lishay basuka? And he kind of fumfered and was a little, chicken, and didn't want to give me an answer.
We actually, it's funny. I love the way I could like piece together a few different Gemaras to come up with an answer. So first of all, the next Mishnah on 11A is the Mishnah about schach needing to be separated from the ground. It gives an example of someone draped vines, which are still connected to the ground, and drape the vines over the sukkah to be schach. And it says it's invalid unless you cut it, disconnect it from the ground. But in regards to a sukkah that was happens to be there, even though it wasn't made with the intention of it being a sukkah. Right. So we touched upon that already in the past. That was more, I feel like it was 8B is where we learned about 8B and 9A. and it's really a machlekes between Beis Hillel and Beis Shammai, and obviously the halacha is always like Hillel, always like Beis Hillel.
Tani, can I ask you, are you and I the only ones that are on the Zoom?
So for today, yes. What's I gotta say? Michael Capperson is he's always on, but he's not. I guess he hasn't figured out the Zoom part today. He usually comes into the synagogue.
I see. Okay.
Um,
And I think, now that I'm alone with you, I think it's important that you excerpt what you're going to discuss in a prospective Zoom. So if it was this week and there was no Yontif on Monday, you should have sent out a PDF saying, this is what we're going to cover at 10 o'clock on Friday, so that anybody who has the time and the interest can read it ahead of time and be somewhat familiar with the material that you're going to discuss on Friday.
got it. Yeah, I appreciate that. Yeah, definitely do that. I did that in the past, but then like I said, the season it was off season, and then
I'm a
people.
newbie at this, so I'm just giving you thoughts as
Yeah,
to
no, I appreciate it. I really appreciate it. I always love getting suggestions. Michael.
Yeah, I finally broke through the issue of the address, but we're fine now.
Amazing. Happy you made it. Very happy you made it.
Yeah, we're looking forward to it.
So, Michael, we have here also someone else is joining our class, hopefully consistently. Stephen Stern. I don't know if you've ever met him, but what I've heard is that he's been with the synagogue for a long time. He's an old timer, as you would say. So I'll introduce you to each other.
We have not met, but only one of us has been here a long time. I've been here for a couple months. That's it.
I've only been here 28 years, so.
But practically a newcomer.
Very nice. Okay, I'm sure you'll get to meet him in person next week when we'll have the class in the synagogue. So let's jump straight into it because it's been a bit to get it started. Unfortunately, Zoom always has its its ways of working. So Steve and I were discussing the previous Mishnah, where it talks about having a sheet spread on top of the schach or under the schach, etc. And in short, Steve, what the Mishnah says is that if the reason why this sheet is there is to be part of the beautification of the sukkah, which I'm sure you've seen before, decorations, etc. Maybe not full sheets, but you've seen decorations. So if it's a decoration for the sukkah, then it is fine. But if it's not for the decorations of the sukkah, then having a sheet on top of your schach, but more importantly, what we're going to discuss today is under your schach, having some sort of canopy, etc., would be an issue. That's what the Mishnah
You mean
says.
to make the sukkah waterproof?
Yeah. So let's say you put you put a sheet, a tarp, to block the water, or to catch all the leaves that are falling from the schach. That would be an issue.
Okay.
That's I know the Rabbi sukkah by 770 in Crown Heights, they had like a retractable kind of roof, but they would only put it on when it was raining and he wasn't inside the sukkah. But if it was inside, they would take it off. But that's only because Chabad is very strict to eat in the sukkah even if it rains. But let's say, for example, someone that when it rains, they don't eat in a sukkah. So what you can easily do is just, because you're anyways patur, you're anyways exempt from a sukkah, a lot of people will just put that awning on top and stay inside the sukkah and just avoid the rain. But that's for another time. Okay, so today's Gemara is going to talk about the being Mainly, we're going to talk
Are we-
about being
are
in
we
a bed.
reading- Are we reading 10A now?
So now we're jumping to 10B. We're jumping to 10B, and I'll tell you the lines that we're holding. It's the paragraph that starts, Rab Judah said in the name of Samuel. That's the beginning of the paragraph.
Okay.
Okay, amazing. So just, I'm gonna say a few, I guess, facts that you need to know in order to understand and appreciate this Gemara. So first of all, again, the Mishnah did mention also about having a bed with a canopy, these more like royal type of beds. So a bed that has a canopy spread out on top can also be an issue. And today we're going to discuss specifically which type of canopy is an issue, what height does it have to be, how wide does it have to be an issue. We're going to talk about that. Another thing that we need to know is that there's a law. First of all, there's a mitzvah to every day say the Shema, twice a day in the morning and the evening. There's a mitzvah called Kriya Shema, to read the Shema every day. Now, there's a verse that says, which means you shouldn't see your nakedness during the Shema, which in other words means, we're going to see in this Gemara that it means a person's head can't be basically the person's nakedness needs to be covered. And if the head is in that vicinity, in that room, so to speak, that area, then it's an issue. And that's why it's going to talk about a case where he's inside a bed, but his head is sticking out. Can we consider this canopy a blanket, or do we consider this canopy like an actual tent? And that would determine if it's like a blanket, then it's fine. You can read the Shema. But if it's like a canopy, then we're going to see it would be more like a tent, then it would be an issue. The last thing I wanted to mention before we get started is there's a different law that we learned in the past, which is also going to become relevant later in the page. I just want to get it all out there now. Is that two sukkahs, one sukkah on top of another sukkah, the bottom one is not valid because it has a sukkah on top. There's a special law of a sukkah on top of another sukkah that the bottom one is invalid.
I think that would be covered by the bottom sukkah having a tarpaulin over it.
Right. So I always thought like that, but today we'll see that it's separate. It's a different category of law. And I guess the idea is because the sukkah on top is kosher. Talking about a kosher sukkah on top. It's a kosher sukkah. It doesn't negate the idea of a sukkah. So you would think maybe that it's okay. So we're saying that no, there's a law that you can have a sukkah under another sukkah. And that will become relevant later in this page. Okay, now actually we'll just, I guess, one more introduction just about the different types of beds that there are. So there's three categories of beds we're going to discuss. There's a bed, the biggest, so to speak, bed, the most normal bed is a bed that has 4 posts and you spread a canopy on top. So the canopy is flat. It's purely a roof.
I sleep with a 4-poster in New York and in Palm Beach.
Okay, amazing. So you'll be able to help us out here. So you have a 4-post bed. So the sheet or whatever you have on top is flat. If you put a canopy on top, that's one category. That's the most permanent. That's the word the Gemara is going to use. That's the most permanent type of bed with the canopy, where it has 4 posts. The next is one with just 2. So if you could try to envision, when you have just 2 posts and you're putting a canopy, it kind of drapes down like a tent, and it just meets at the top. Now, such a bed, we're going to assume, doesn't have a tefach of, a tefach is a handbreadth, doesn't have a handbreadth of width at the top. It just meets at a very pointed top, and there's not a full handbreadth there. Now, that's the second category. And the first category is 4 poles, flat roof. That obviously has a flat roof of a tefach. The other one is where it's 2 posts and it kind of meets at the middle, at the top, like an A frame. And then there's gonna be a third one, which is the same like that with 2 posts, but a lot more temporary. Now the Gemara doesn't discuss why one is more permanent than the other. The only clue that I have is the Gemara at some point calls it a kilas chasanim, which means there's a canopy of a chasa, of a chatan, of a groom. So it could be that because it was for a groom, it was only for the, let's say, the 7-day Shava Brachas, the 7-day celebration, that's it. So it wasn't made in such a permanent fashion. And therefore it's even less permanent than the other regular 2-post canopy bed. Okay, now that we know all this, anyone have any questions on what I said?
No,
No, I think that it was pretty clear, with the exception of the 2-post bed being less permanent than the 4-post bed, unless the practice then was to nail up removable posts for the 2. Otherwise, I'm not certain why 2 would be I understand the flat roof issue, but why 2 would be less permanent was a little confusing to me.
So it's interesting. It's the way, I'll be honest, the way I understand it, based on what I'm reading in Tosfos, is there's more like there's factors here. What's considered a permanent factor? So if you're, let's say, 10 tfachim high, right, 10 handbreadths high, that's a factor to make something be considered permanent. If you have another factor, would be like I was discussing earlier, if you're going to have a actual roof, so to speak, an actual part of the canopy that's flat and a tefach wide, that's also going to be a factor to consider something permanent. Those are the main. I think those are the real things. So anytime you have 2 posts, it's like I said, it's an A-frame. It meets at the top. Then you're lacking the factor of having at least a tefach.
That's helpful then. So part of permanence is permanence with the possibility of a roof, as opposed to just
Exactly. Yeah, it's not just height.
permanence.
Exactly.
Okay. Got
Exactly.
it.
Okay. So here we go. Rabbi Yehuda said the name of Samuel. Now we mentioned this many times that if it doesn't have a name, it shows how prominent it is. But I just do want to clarify that this is a Talmudic sage, and that's why we'll have a question soon from a Brisa, from a Tanaic source, which is very similar to a Mishnah. Here we go. He says like this: it is permissible to sleep in a canopied bed in a sukkah, even though it has a flat roof, provided it is not 10 handbreadths high. So what he's saying is that, it's pretty clear that if it's less than 10 handbreadths, even if you have a flat roof on top of the bed, it's still going to be a kosher sukkah, or it's kosher living in the sukkah. Okay. Moving right along, the Gemara says, "Hey, 1 second, come in here," which means we're about to ask a question on him from a higher source. What's the Gemara ask? It says in a Brisa, which we discussed before. A Brisa is the kind of the parts that got edited out of the Mishnah. When Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi, Rabbi Judah the Prince, was writing the Mishnah, he tried to make it as concise as possible. So there was a lot of edits, a lot of things that were part of the tradition but didn't make it to the final cut, but they were still part of the tradition. They were still orally passed down generation to teacher to students, and that's why in the Gemara will bring a lot of these brises that weren't written down in the Mishnah, but they still were passed along orally, teacher to student. So the brisa says like this: he who sleeps in a canopy bed in a sukkah has not fulfilled his obligation. So seemingly, here we're saying clearly, it's a bed with a canopy, and it doesn't count as being in a sukkah if you have this canopy. So how could Shmuel say that it's permissible? So here the answer is very simple. It's almost like, why did the Gemara even bother asking? But the answer is that Shmuel made a clear clarification. It depends if it's 10 hambras or not. So Shmuel will say that, that brisa is talking about where the canopy was where it was more than 10 hambras high, and that's why it was invalid. He was not fulfilling his obligation. But I was talking about where I said it was kosher, where it's permissible, is specifically where it's less than 10 hambras. Okay, so he deflected that question. Moving right along. So Gemara says, I'll ask you from a different place. It was objected like this. It says in a different place, he who sleeps under the bed in a sukkah has not fulfilled his obligation. Interesting. Someone that decides to snug himself under a bed, which is very similar to what we're discussing until now. He's in the sukkah, but he has a covering, not a canopy. Here it's the actual bed, the actual mattress of the bed, but he has this on top of him. And the brisa says that he's not fulfilled his obligation. So what's the, again, obvious answer is, there we're talking about a bed that's 10 hambras high. And I was talking about less than 10 hambras. So again, basically what's happening is the Gemara keeps on asking questions from sources that don't say how high this canopy or this covering is. So Shmuel every time is just saying, you know what it's really referring to? Over 10 hambras. And that's why it's not fulfilling his obligation. So the Gemara gives another try. And this one, it's going to be clear that we're talking about.
Where are you reading?
So again, the paragraph that I'm reading now, again, is on 10b. Like we said, it starts come in here.
Paragraph that starts with come in here.
Yeah, exactly. The paragraph that starts come in here. So we're a few lines in. The words we're saying is come in here again in that paragraph. There's another time it says come in here, and that's what we're reading.
Got it.
And it has letters that are capital letters, or if he spread a sheet over the frame.
Yeah.
Okay, amazing. So, by the way, sorry for my voice. It's I haven't found it since Simchas Torah yet. This is still suffering the repercussions of Simchas Torah.
That's a good. That's a good thing.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so here we go. It says in our Mishnah, if he spread a sheet over the frame of a 4-post bed, the sukkah is invalid. Now, again, here it doesn't say clearly the height. So the Gemara says, again, we're talking about it's 10 hambras high. That's why it's invalid. Now there's also, it is the case where they are 10 hambras high. So you can't ask Shmuel who's talking about under 10 hambras. But the Gemara persists and says, but surely it was not taught thus, for it has been taught that naklitin. Yeah, in our Mishnah we mentioned this word naklitin, which again means a frame with 2 poles, and kinaifos, which means a frame with 4 poles. So that's what we're dealing with. 2 different types of bed, one with 2, one with 4, which we mentioned before. And he says, if one spread a sheet over a frame of kinaifos, which 4 poles, then it's invalid. It is invalid. But if it's over naklitin, then it is valid, provided that the naklitin are not 10 hambras high above the bed. So again, if it has 2 poles, it's valid, but only if it's not 10 hambras high, which shows you that that's only specifically referring to a 2-post bed and it still has this height requirement of being under 10 to be kosher. What about the case of a 4-post bed? That is, it's implied it's always invalid, even if it's less than 10 handbreadths. Again, the Mishnah writes only in the case of the two-pole bed canopy is it kosher if it's under 10.
Excuse me.
But once you talk about,
Is this whole discussion about a bed in the sukkah as opposed to a table and chairs?
you're talking, you're saying if someone would be sleeping under the table, is that what you're referring to?
No. We're talking about a bed in the sukkah. Is this kosher or not? But 99% of the sukkahs that I know of, it got tables and chairs where people eat.
Yeah, it's okay. That's why, by the way, if you look at a very good point you're bringing up. So if you look at the wording of most of the sources we quoted, it doesn't say the sukkah is invalid. It was always saying that he has not fulfilled his obligation. Now, it's important distinction, because like exactly what Stephen is saying, if let's say you have a sukkah, which let's say only has a bed, because that's what you've been picturing in your mind. So it only has a bed, but there's room around the bed, etc. Let's say you were there and you wanted to eat. That would be counted as eating in the sukkah. It's only specifically when you're under the bed, when you're under the canopy. At that point in time, you're not fulfilling your obligation. Meaning, let's say there's an obligation to sleep in a sukkah. Yeah, again, not everyone does it for everyone's different reasons, but there's an obligation to sleep in the sukkah. So if someone slept on that bed, then he didn't fulfill his obligation.
So this is like a sukkah motel.
Exactly. So if you're in the so we're saying that if you're in a sukkah that has a bed, and you're going to sleep in that bed, and that bed has a canopy, then you have now fulfilled your obligation. Not that the sukkah itself is invalid, unless this bed takes up the whole space of the sukkah. Then there's a sheet blocking all the schach. But if you can find a spot where you have only schach on top of you, then that would be you would be able to eat there, etc. Mika bracha. That would be fine. We're only talking about the time that you're in that bed.
Yeah,
And that's a good point that Stephen's mentioning, because all of a sudden here, the last source we just read, it starts using this word valid and invalid. And I actually have this question in the back of my mind. I'm like, why did we change the language from, instead of talking about have you fulfilled the obligation or not, to actually talking about the sukkah itself, is it valid or not? And I don't have an answer. My only answer is that we could be talking about a case where the bed, like you said, almost like a sukkah motel, where like literally the bed takes up the entire room. So now that you have a sheet on top, the sheet takes up the entire room. So by definition, now the sukkah is invalid because there's no valid space.
Let me describe a different scenario picking up on Stephen's point. And I do understand what you're saying, that if the law is you should sleep in the sukkah, when this was written, probably a lot of people did have beds, available in the sukkah. But for now, if there were a situation where you have a table and you eat at that table, but you want to put up mosquito netting, as would be the case in lots of parts of the world, you put up your poles, you put up mosquito netting. Is that permitted at the dining table? Is it permitted if you're not 10 tefachim above the surface of the table? Is that the ground surface, or is it pasul altogether? And if you make it into a tent-like structure, does that change the scenario?
That's a good question.
Michael, thanks for making it more relevant.
So it didn't make it any easier for any of us.
No, but at least no. But that's exactly what we're dealing with. If like you said, all this height and things like that, based on what we're gonna say, hopefully it will. After all of the different opinions and everything, we'll have answers to that. But that would be a scenario for our experience with the sukkah, where you have a table and chairs. But like you said, in those days, it was very, the big schlep part of the sukkah was the sleeping in the sukkah, because that's what most people did, and that's why the bed was very important.
Why is it so important to sleep in the sukkah?
No, I'm saying it's important for them to have a good bed situation in the sukkah. One of the mitzvah of sukkah officially is, we didn't get there yet in this tractate in our learning. We'll get there later. But the mitzvah of sukkah is to live in the sukkah for 7 days. It doesn't say clearly eat. It just live in the sukkah. So
it's unclear what that means, but it means have your daily activities in the sukkah.
exactly. So the Mishnah and the Gemara will talk about like the means. You're eating, you're drinking, you're sleeping. It says even you're strolling, whatever that means. You know, you're hanging out when you're watching the game. Watch the game in the sukkah. That's we'll talk about the specifics when we get there. But that's just the general. That's what the mitzvah of sukkah is. So one of them is like the Mishnah clearly spells out, is to sleep in a sukkah. That's why if you go to places like Borough Park today, you'll see it. They have this little bed in the corner of the sukkah, or maybe like a fold out or whatever. And at night, if it's not raining, peek into their sukkah, you'll see them sleeping in their sukkah. But yeah, no, it's not as common as it used to be, that's for sure. In the times of the Mishnah, that was like the typical Jew, would sleep in the sukkah. That was it was like
before lights and air conditioning and mosquito nets, right?
Yeah, I don't know. It definitely wasn't easy. But that's it. But one of the laws, by the way, is we didn't get to this one either. There's a law that says hamitztar pater min sukkah. Someone that's in pain, someone that's being bothered because of the fact that he's in the sukkah, he's pater, he's exempt. That's why if it's raining, you don't need to be in the sukkah anymore. If there's like the mosquitoes, you don't need to be in the sukkah anymore. If it's too hot, like really, really too hot, I'm sure that's also fits in that category. And that's why, by the way, that's one of the reasons why a lot of even Orthodox Jews won't sleep in a sukkah, because it's too mitzvah for them. So when it comes to sleeping, they're like exempt.
Interesting.
But we didn't touch upon that yet in this tractate. Okay, now that we have it clear, again, not that see things, but we're not talking about the sukkah is invalid or valid. Rather, if you're under this canopy, is that fulfilling your obligation or not? Again, so it said that kinaifes, which are 4-post bed, it's invalid. 2-post bed is invalid if it's 10 handbreadths high. If it's less than 10 handbreadths, it's kosher. What does that imply about the 4-handbreadth bed, the 4-pole bed? That even if it's less than 10 handbreadths, it's still going to be an issue. You're still not fulfilling your obligation, even if it's less than 10 handbreadths. Again, because the Mishnah only writes this whole 10 handbreadth thing only by the 2-post bed. By the 4-post bed, I just gave a blanket saying that it's an issue. Blanket statement, it's an issue. So now back to Shmuel. Seemingly, we have a question on Shmuel, because clearly it says that.
What paragraph are you referring to now?
So we're holding this implies. The words are, the sentence starts off, this implies. Same paragraph, the sentence starts, this implies. This implies that kinaifes are invalid even if they're less than 10 handbreadths high. So how could Shmuel say that, you can have a canopy over your bed as long as it's under 10 handbreadths? That's the question on Shmuel. So we finally found a source that actually we can know the height of the case. So Shmuel can't just deflect it and say, that's talking about over 10 handbreadths. Here we found the case even under 10 handbreadths, clearly saying, and it still says it's not okay. You're not fulfilling the obligation. So here, this is where Shmuel needs to make this big distinction that I already mentioned before we started. That different beds are once considered more permanent than the other. And if you're more permanent, then you're going to be considered a significant area. Meaning let's say, again, you're under, if you're in this significant area, this canopy, and we consider it significant, that makes it an issue with regards to you being under the sukkah, because you're under something else. But if it's not so significant, in other words, the words the Gemara using, it's not so permanent, then it won't become an issue between you and the schach. So he says like this: kinofos are different. The 4-post beds are different, since they are permanent. Now we discuss why they're more permanent, because the main thing is that it has a full flat roof instead of an A-frame. That's the more permanent factor. Okay, so that's the distinction. So Shmuel, in other words, is saying, when do I say it's okay to be under 10? Only if you're not so permanent. But if you're as permanent as a 4-post bed, then it's always going to be an issue, even if it's under 10 hamras. Okay, that's his answer. The Gemara asks, but behold, the case of one sukkah above another. Yeah, remember we mentioned you can't have 2 sukkahs one on top of the other. If you do that, the bottom one is invalid. So the Gemara asks again, case of one sukkah above another, which is also permanent. Yeah, meaning the sukkah on top, which is invalidating the one on bottom. That sukkah is a permanent structure, and definitely as much as a bed is, as much as a 4-post bed is. And it says that Shmuel said, when is there an issue to have a sukkah on top of another sukkah? Only if the top one is 10 handbreadths tall. But if it's less than 10 handbreadths, then then both sukkahs will be valid. The top one does not invalidate the bottom one. That's what we learned. We learned this last week.
Except that there's a tarp in between. Otherwise, you have no floor to the top one.
No, so what's the floor of the top one? The schach of the bottom one. That's what we discussed last week.
Even if it's a permanent piece of wood.
Yeah, you could. By the way, I don't know if people realize you can make schach out of, it can't be too thick, but pretty thick beams of wood. As long as they're disconnected from the ground, you can use pretty thick pieces of wood as your schach.
But I have never seen a schach, a normal schach, not a double decker, that has wooden boards as a roof.
Right. So because most people won't do that, storage wise and other reasons. But I'm just saying that if someone wanted to, they can make schach in a way that it would actually be a pretty solid.
So the top sukkah filters down to the bottom one.
So it depends. Depends how tall this top one is. If the top one is 10 handbreadths high or more, then it invalidates the bottom one because of this special law. You can't have one sukkah top of the other. But if it's less than 10 handbreadths, then we discussed, Shmuel says that you can consider it one big sukkah.
Okay, just as a quick question, because I don't want to be a party pooper, but at 11 o'clock, I have a telemedicine appointment. What is a handbreadth in plain English?
Literally a handbreadth from here to here.
It's a fist.
Yeah, exactly. In Hebrew, that's the word tafach. It's like about, I don't know, I would say about 2.5 inches maybe.
Well, yeah, I had that same question, Stephen. Actually, you and I talked about this in the past. I found 2 versions of it because there were differences in how many tefachim are in an amma. But forgetting that for the moment, somewhere between 4 and 5 inches is what I found, with the general consensus being 4 inches. There were some 3.
I just measured mine, and it was 4 inches. Okay.
Yeah, that was about the consensus. But since there were these couple of definitions of tefachim in an amma, there was a little spread there. But I've been going with 4, and actually that was based on what Tani was telling me. So it was.
Yeah, but 4 inches times 10 is 40 inches. That's a little over 3 feet.
Yeah, it's very low. It's very low.
you gotta be like a snake to get into such a small space.
Yeah, and we also discussed how wide the sukkah needs to be. It only needs to be 7 tvachim, 7 handbreadths wide, which is even smaller than that, width and length. So yeah, if someone wants to make the smallest sukkah ever, it will be pretty small. I remember as kids we would do that. We would take Coca-Cola crates. I was trying to describe to Cece, Rabbi Shiner's youngest son, what Coca-Cola crates are. He doesn't. I feel so old, but they're very easily stackable. You know, they go one into another. So we would make our own little sukkahs out of Coca-Cola crates, and they would be very low, so like no adults can go in, and also not that wide. But that was our version.
It's 3 minutes to 11, and I gotta move off this Zoom onto another Zoom.
Amazing.
This was Tani. Thank you very much for an inaugural experience, and I'll see you again on the Zoom next week at 11. If that works for you,
Yeah,
Mike.
at 10 o'clock. There is an option also to be at the synagogue. So whatever's your preference.
I happen to like this, okay? But we'll see, okay?
Amazing. Okay. Good to see
All
you,
right,
Stephen.
very good. Okay, sure. Both of you.
Nice meeting you remotely, Stephen. Good luck with the telemedicine visit.
Okay, thank you. All right, bye-bye.
Bye. Tani, where are you, by the way?
Oh, so we're in Atlanta. I mean, now it's called Stone Mountain, Georgia.
Okay, so you're at the barbecue.
Yeah, so we're basically the rabbi couldn't make it in the end, so they sent Hindi and I to cover.
Okay.
So we
Now, does that mean you have to barbecue or just eat?
no. I'm doing more of the Shabbaton part of it.
Okay.
And no, they have I don't know, have you met Warren Rachmacher?
No.
Never. He's also joined the show fairly recently, within the past year and a half. And he's like I don't want to call professional because I don't think he gets paid for it, but he's an experienced barbecue competition. So he's the one that's heading it. Him and Yossi Dworkin, Sarah Dworkin's husband, they do it together, and they have a team name. The synagogue has a team name, Burnt Offerings, and they have a logo. So it's the serious stuff.
Neat.
And last year they came in second place for like ribs or something. So
Okay. Well, I'll be anxious to hear how the team does. Have fun with the Shabbaton, enjoy it. And we lived in Atlanta for about 6 years. So
right. Have you been to Stone Mountain?
We've been by there. I haven't spent any time at Stone Mountain. I was mostly trying to earn a living and
who does that?
Traveling at the time. Yeah, that's how I feel. But in any case, you enjoy it. Regards to the family, and we'll pick up next week. I don't know if we'll get to it, but I had a few questions coming up with regards the vines and putting them over and cutting.
Amazing. Yes, I'm actually really.
Yeah, why weaving a tree is okay, but not. So
I'm really excited to get. I thought we would get to that Mishnah today.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, with all the complications, we didn't. But that next Mishnah, in other words, is where we're going to start the topic of schach. We're going to move on from sukkah to schach, and I'm excited about that.
Like you were saying, they're moving. The Mishnayot are moving quicker now, so it's very interesting. But in any case, let you go and enjoy Stone Mountain. I will get to my. Actually, I don't have another conference till 11:30.
You don't have what was it? A telemedical?
Telemedicine now, but I do have my University of North Carolina advisory board meeting by Zoom 1:30 to 5. So
oh wow,
yeah, so
that's intense.
I'll be staring at this thing. Well, we have a new dean that just started, so she's going to introduce herself to the board. An interesting lady, all like myself, an ex Centers for Disease Control person. So it'll be nice to see what she has to say. But like I say, let me let you go and enjoy things.
Alrighty, so good
Thank
to see
you
you.
so-
Happy
thank
you were
you
able to
so
make
much.
it on eventually.
Yeah,
Alrighty.
I plan, unless there's a problem, I plan to be there and live and in person on Friday. So we'll see you then.
Yeah, alright. Have a good Shabbos.
Shabbat shalom to you.
Amen.